The lantern above Grey Hollow burned on whale oil and stubbornness, and on the night the storm came in, sideways off the black water. Eloan Hart climbed the 91 steps in her dead father's oilskin coat to find a wolf bleeding on her doorstep. Not a wolf the size of a dog. A wolf the size of a pony, black as the gap between stars, with a notched left ear and a gash across his shoulder that had painted the stone threshold red. He looked up at her, with eyes the color of lamplight through honey, and Eloan, who had splinted gull wings and pulled fishhooks out of seals and once delivered a breech goat in a hailstorm, did not scream. She set down her oil can, knelt in the wet, and said, Well, you picked the only door on this cliff. Smart boy." The wolf did not think of himself as a smart boy. The wolf thought of himself in the ordinary way of things, as Kyle Draven, Alpha King of the Northern Reach, commander of 11 packs and 400 miles of coastline, a man whose counselors flinched when he set down a cup too hard. He had shifted to run the cliff paths alone, the way he did when the crown got too heavy, and a rock slide had opened his shoulder to the bone. He had smelled lavender through the rain. Impossible lavender on a salt cliff where nothing should grow. And he had followed it the way drowning men follow air. I should leave, he thought, as the small woman in the enormous coat looped her arms under his chest and hauled him inside with a grunt that was frankly insulting. The moment the storm breaks, the moment the shoulder knits. A king does not convalesce on a stranger's hearth like a stray. I was still telling himself that an hour later, lying on a braided rug that smelled of tallow and dried lavender, while she boiled her one good needle and threaded it with gut. "This will hurt," she told him, and pressed her forehead briefly to his, the way she'd learned to gentle frightened animals. "You can bite the coat if you need to. It's already ruined. Everything I own is already ruined, so you're in luck." She stitched him with small, even hands. She talked the whole time, not because she thought the wolf understood, but because her father had taught her that a steady voice is a kind of medicine. So Kyle Draven, Alpha King, lay with his ear, flicked toward her, and learned things no spy in his kingdom could have brought him. That her name was Eloan, that her father had been keeper of this lantern for 30 years, until the night a patrol of 11 wolves went into the fog off Grey Hollow and never came out, and the pack had needed someone to blame, and a dead man's daughter was easy to blame. That the pack had stopped paying for the oil 4 years ago. That she paid for it herself, rendering tallow candles and setting broken bones for fishermen's animals. Because somewhere out on that water, there were always patrols, and patrols got lost, and her father had made her swear on his last night that the light never went dark. "They took the cottage in the village," she said, tying off the final stitch. "Left me the tower, because nobody else wanted to climb it. 91 steps. I count them every night." She sat back on her heels and looked at her patient, this impossible black mountain of a wolf, taking up half her floor. "You're a big one, aren't you? Royal Guard stock, I'd guess. Ran off from some garrison. Well, no one comes up here, so your secret's safe with me." The wolf made a sound low in his chest that she took for pain. It was not pain. Then she did the thing that sealed his fate, though neither of them knew it yet. She heated water in a dented copper tub meant for washing wool, and because the wound needed cleaning and the mud needed to come off him before it soured, she bathed him, rolled her sleeves to the elbow, and worked lavender soap into the fur of the Alpha King of the Northern Reach, scrubbing behind his notched ear, muttering, "Honestly, the state of you. while he sat in 3 inches of grey water with the dignity of a drowned emperor, and his inner wolf howled with a joy so enormous and undignified that Kael was grateful, deeply grateful, that she could not hear it. "I will leave at dawn," he told himself, as she towelled him with a flour sack. "I will leave by midday," he told himself, as she fed him fish stew from her own bowl, going without, so he'd have enough, and he pretended not to notice. "I will absolutely leave by nightfall," he told himself, as she banked the fire, climbed into her narrow bed, and he settled on the rug and listened to the lantern mechanism. Turn overhead, tick, 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 like the tower's slow heart, and the rain wore itself out against the glass. He stayed 9 days. He would later insist, under oath to his own reflection, that this was strategic. The pattern established itself with the efficiency of a military campaign, which was the only way Kael knew how to think about it. At night, the wolf. He would arrive at dusk, and Aloan stopped pretending to be surprised somewhere around the 4th visit, and started leaving the door unlatched somewhere around the 6th. By day, the shoulder mostly healed, he was the king again. And here fate showed its sense of humour, because the Northern Court had scheduled its coastal inspection that very month, and the royal party took residence in the harbour town below Grey Hollow. And on the 2nd morning, Kael Draven walked the market in his black coat, with his beta at his shoulder, and came face to face with a small woman haggling fiercely over the price of whale oil. "2 silver a jug is robbery, Master Paul, and you know it. That oil keeps your own son's patrol boat off the rocks. Take it up with the Crown, girl. Prices are prices." Kael heard himself say, "The Crown is standing right here." She turned. Up close, in daylight, she had flecks of amber in grey eyes and a smear of candle tallow on her jaw, and she smelled of lavender, and his entire body forgot its rank. She took in the black coat, the guards, the way the whole market had gone quiet and bent-necked around him, and she did the thing no one in 4 years had done to Kael Draven. She was unimpressed. "Then the Crown can explain," she said, "why lantern oil costs double what it did when the lantern was actually funded." A pause. Her eyes narrowed slightly, the way they did when she examined a wound. "Have we met? You seem," she tilted her head, "familiar." "No," said Kael too fast. His beta, Rowan, a lean, grey-eyed man, who had known Kael since they were pups and feared him not at all, glanced sideways. "No," Kael said again, with kingly finality, and bought every jug of whale oil in the stall and had it sent up the cliff, and walked away while Elowen stood there, holding her 2 silver and frowning after him like a woman working out a sum that wouldn't come right. "Sire," Rowan said carefully, when they were clear of the market. "You've a bit of," he gestured at his own jaw, "flour sack, on your collar, and you smell of lavender soap. Have done for a week." "I patrol the cliffs at night," Kael said. "The wind carries things. The wind carries soap. Coastal wind is complex." "Of course, sire," said Rowan, in the tone of a man filing something away for later. That night the wolf stole her scarf. It was not planned. She'd left it over the chair, grey wool, worn thin, saturated with her, and the wolf simply took it and lay on it, and when she laughed and tried to pull it back, he flattened all 200 pounds of himself upon it, and gazed at the ceiling like a creature with no knowledge of scarves. She let him keep it. In the morning it was gone from the tower entirely, and if anyone had searched the Alpha King's austere chambers in the harbour garrison, they would have found, folded beneath his pillow with military precision, one threadbare grey scarf, and Kael would have had them executed probably, or at least reassigned somewhere with weather. The fourth night, the wolf brought her a fish, a whole silver bass, fat and gleaming, laid on her doorstep with tremendous ceremony. She cooked it and shared it with him and told him he was a gentleman, and the wolf sat with his chest out, while inside him the king said, "We do not preen, we are a sovereign," and the wolf did not listen, because the wolf had never once in his life lied to himself, which put him one up on the king. The sixth night it rained, and the rug was apparently insufficient, because she woke at some black hour to find the bed sagging, a mountain of warm fur pressed along her spine, one heavy paw laid over her hip with the unmistakable weight of a claim. She should have shoved him off. The bed was barely big enough for her. Instead, she lay there in the dark, warmer than she'd been in 4 winters, listening to the lantern turn, and whispered, "Just this once." And the wolf's tail thumped twice against the wall. It was not just the once. Rowan cornered his king on the 8th morning. "Sire, the night guards report you leave the garrison at dusk and return at dawn, alone. Every night. I am conducting reconnaissance of the Lantern Tower. The tower is a strategic asset. The cook says a full base went missing from the kitchens Thursday." "Then the cook," said Kyle Draven, Alpha King of the Northern Reach, looking his oldest friend dead in the eye, should guard her fish. Rowan bowed. At the door, he paused. "For what it's worth, sire, the whole garrison thinks the Lantern Keeper is the only person on this coast worth reconnoitering." And he was gone before Kyle could decide whether that was insubordination or the truest counsel he'd received in years. The near disaster came on the 11th night. She was rubbing salve into the healed shoulder, working the scar with her thumbs, when she went still. "That's strange," she murmured. "This scar. The king has one just like it. Right shoulder. I saw it in the market when his coat pulled, when he reached for the oil jugs." Her hands paused in his fur. The wolf held very, very still, in the manner of a creature who has just heard a floorboard creak in an empty house. Same side, same length. A long silence. The lantern ticked overhead. Then she laughed at herself, small and tired. "Listen to me. Next I'll be saying you've got his eyes." She scratched his notched ear. "Though you do, you know. Exact same color. Lamplight and honey. Lucky for you, you're better company." The wolf did not breathe for some time. "Leave," said the king inside him. "This ends badly. She hates the crown, and fairly. She was wronged in your name, under your law, while you sat 100 miles away, signing papers. Leave now, before the lie grows teeth." The wolf put his head in her lap. "Coward," said the king. "Yes," agreed the wolf, comfortably, and went to sleep. Here is what Ilawan told the wolf, over those weeks, that she told no living soul. She told him about the ledger. She'd found it 2 winters back, wedged behind a loose stone in the tower's map room, where her father must have hidden it. And it had taken her months of squinting by lamplight to understand what she was looking at. Patrol schedules, route orders. And in the margins, her father's cramped handwriting, dates and headings, and one phrase underlined until the pen tore the paper. "Roted dark, moon's 4th quarter." Again. The night the 11 were lost, the order sheet showed their course changed at the last hour, swung wide of Grey Hollow, out beyond the reach of her father's light, into the fog and the rocks and the rogue waters. Someone had ordered them away from the lantern. Someone with a seal she recognized now, because she'd seen it stamped on the harbour notices all month, the seal of Councillor Vesic, who had arrived with the royal party, silver-haired and soft-spoken, and who had smiled at her in the market like a man who did not remember ruining her life. "My father wasn't drunk that night," she whispered into the wolf's fur, in the dark, in the bed that had somehow become theirs. The light never failed. They were sent around it, and I can't prove why, and no one would hear me if I could. Who takes the word of the keeper's mad daughter against a king's counselor? Her voice cracked, quiet as a wick guttering. I keep the light for them, you know, the lost ones, in case any of them are still out there, trying to come home. It's stupid. My Da used to say, a lantern is just a promise you keep every night, whether anyone sees it or not. The wolf lay rigid in the dark, and inside him, the king was no longer arguing with the wolf. Inside him, the king was very quietly planning a war. He should have confessed then. He knew it. He drafted it 100 ways on the cliff path at dawn. Eloan, the wolf you bathe is the king you distrust. Eloan, the scarf thief and the sovereign are one animal. Eloan, I have eaten from your bowl and slept in your bed and heard your secrets, and I did not stop you, because I have been more honest as a beast than I have ever managed as a man. He confessed nothing. Instead, fate sent Lady Maren. She arrived with the second wave of the court, alpha-born, tall and glacial, her family's intended offering for the empty seat beside the throne. And she found her king distracted, restless, prone to vanishing at dusk. Maren was not stupid. She followed the garrison gossip up the cliff road one afternoon, and found its source hanging laundry in the wind, a small omega in a mended dress, and Maren did what women of her training did. She smiled beautifully and went to work. So you're the lantern girl. How quaint this all is. Her gaze travelled the tower, the tallow racks. The three-legged goat, Eloan, had splintered as a kid and never managed to send away. You should know he does this. Collects strays when the crown wearies him. There was a falconer's daughter in the Eastern Reach, 2 summers past. He'll go home when the court goes home, and you'll still be here, counting your steps. Eloan pinned a sheet to the line with great care. That's kind of you to ride all this way to tell me. Uphill, even. Maren's smile thinned. But at the base of the tower, leaving, she stopped. Her gloved hand rested a moment on the cold stone, and when she spoke, her voice had dropped out of its music into something plain. My brother was in a patrol out of the South Quarter. 6 years gone now. The survivors said the only reason any of them made it back was a light on some cliff they didn't know, burning past midnight when every other beacon on the coast had been snuffed for economy. She did not look at Eloan. I don't know if it was yours. I never asked. She pulled her glove straight and was cold again, all in a breath. The oil merchants overcharge you. Tell them Maren of House Callow said so, and watch the price fall. And she rode down the hill, leaving Eloan standing among her flapping sheets, wrong-footed entirely. The jealousy, when it came, arrived from the other direction. Finn, the harbour chandler's son, broad and sunny and kind, had climbed the 91 steps twice a season for years to deliver wicking, and had loved Eloan with the patient hopelessness of a tide. That week he arrived with wicking, and a bundle of actual lavender bought off a southern trader at ruinous cost, and an invitation to the harvest fires. And it was Kael's ill luck to be on the cliff road, in his own skin, kingly and coated, when Finn came down whistling. Cale did not decide to stop him. His body simply did it, stepped into the path, and something rolled off the king in that moment that made Finn, who had never met a wolf he couldn't befriend, go pale to the ears. "You carry lavender," said Kyle in a voice he did not recognize. For the keeper, sire. Miss Elowen. She's fond of—" "I know what she's fond of." Low. Hardly words. The growl of something that had slept in her bed and had not one civilized thought left in its head. Finn was pressed to the cliff wall without ever being touched, and Kyle was near enough to see his own eyes reflected, burning gold, before Rowan's hand closed on his shoulder from behind. "Sire," Rowan said quietly, "you're frightening the Wiking." Cale stepped back, breathed. The gold banked. Finn fled downhill with the loose-limbed sprint of a man who intends to take up a new trade in a new town. And Kyle stood on the cliff road with his hands shaking, and understood, finally and completely, what his wolf had known from the first breath of lavender in the rain. "Mate," he said out loud. The word tasted like the truth. Rowan, wisely, said nothing at all. "This ends tonight," Kyle told him. "I tell her tonight. Everything." But Councillor Vesic ended it first, because Vesic had also heard the garrison gossip, and unlike Maren, he had climbed no hills. He had simply sent a clerk to learn everything about the lantern keeper of Grey Hollow, and the clerk had come back with a name, Hart, and had felt the past shift under him like bad ice. He remembered the father. He remembered what the father had begun to suspect, about route orders sold to rogue crews who paid in smugglers' gold for coastline, swept conveniently clear of patrols, 11 wolves fed to the fog to keep one ledger balanced. He had slept soundly for 4 years on the theory that everything the old keeper knew had died with him. Now the daughter had the king's ear, or the king's something, and Vesic sat alone that evening with the candle burning down, and it should be said, because it was true, that he wept. Briefly, and with genuine grief, the way a man weeps for the person he had once meant to be. The young harbour officer, who'd taken the first bribe to pay his sister's healer, and told himself only once. He wept, and then he dried his face, and sent 3 men up the cliff with orders that the tower should burn, and the keeper should be in it. Because Vesic had learned long ago that the second crime is easier than the first, and by the 20th you feel almost nothing at all. They came at dusk, before the wolf's hour. Elowen was in the lantern room trimming the wick when she smelled the smoke. Pitch smoke. Wrong smoke. Rising up the stairwell, and heard boots on her 91 steps. She did the thing she could. She barred the lantern room door, and lit the light anyway, out of pure spite and promise, so that whatever happened, the beam went out across the water one more time. The door began to splinter, and out on the darkening cliff road, a black wolf running late to his own confession, saw his mate's tower bleeding smoke against the last of the light, and the world went very simple. Elowen would remember it always in pieces. The door bursting, a man with an iron bar and an apology in his eyes, which was somehow worse. The window exploding inward, glass like sleet, and 200 pounds of black fury arriving among her attackers like the judgment of the old gods. And then, because there were 3 of them, and blades and smoke, and because a wolf's teeth cannot bar a stairwell and shield a woman at once, the moment the wolf did the thing he had sworn on his crown never to do in front of her, he shifted. There was no gentle way for her to see it. Bone and shadow rearranged themselves between one heartbeat and the next. Fur becoming a broad, scarred back. Paws becoming hands that caught an iron bar mid-swing. And where her wolf had been stood the alpha king of the northern reach, barefoot in her burning lantern room, gold-eyed and terrible. And his voice, when he spoke, shook the stones. You raised iron against my mate. It was not a long fight after that. It was barely a fight at all. When it was done, when the fire was beaten out with her father's oilskin coat, and the three men lay bound with their own rope, and the beam of the great lantern swung out over the water, serene, untouched, as if nothing in the world had happened, Kael turned to her, and Aloan looked at the king, and looked at the notched left ear, human now, the old scar carried into this shape too, and looked at the eyes, lamplight and honey. No, she said. Aloan, no. She backed up until the wick table stopped her. Her hands were bleeding, small glass cuts, and she didn't notice, and that hurt him worse than the iron bar had. The scar. I saw the scar. I told the wolf, that you had his scar, and you sat there and let me laugh at myself. Her voice climbed. The scarf. That was you. The fish from your own kitchen. That was you. I bathed you. I fed you my supper and went hungry. I slept. She stopped, went white, then scarlet. I slept beside you, for weeks, and you let me. The king let me. You heard everything. My father. The ledger. Things I have never said to a single living, her breath tore. You didn't take my secrets. I gave them to a wolf. There's a difference, and you knew the difference every single night, and you stayed anyway. Yes, said Kael. She stared at him. Whatever excuse she'd braced for, it wasn't that. Every word is true, he said. I stayed the first night because I was wounded. I stayed the second because you smell of lavender, and I am apparently a much weaker man than 400 miles of coastline believes. The scarf is under my pillow in the garrison. The fish was stolen, personally, by me, from my own cook, who suspects the quartermaster. When you told the wolf you kept the light for the lost ones, I lay in your bed and planned the ruin of the man who wronged your father, and it will be a very thorough ruin. But that is not why I did it. I did it because, and here the king of the northern reach, who had stared down war councils, looked at a small woman with tallow-burned fingers and had to start twice. Because as a wolf I have never lied to you, not once, and as a man I have done nothing else since the market, and I would like very much to close the distance between those two creatures. They both love you. That has never been the question. The lantern turned overhead. Tick, tick. Get out, said Aloan. He bowed his head. He gathered the bound men, and he went, and he did not argue, and that, too, was somehow worse or better. She couldn't tell, and she sat on the floor of her smoke-stained lantern room among the glass and cried until the beam had swung out over the water 100 times. And then, because a promise is a promise, whether anyone sees it or not, she got up and trimmed the wick and kept the light burning. He came back on foot at dusk 3 days later, not as the wolf, as a man in a plain coat carrying nothing, and he stopped at the base of the tower and did not climb, because the door was hers, and he had used the window once already in his life. He simply sat down on the bottom step, in the wind, Beneath her light, the way lost patrols sat beneath it, waiting for the fog to lift. She let him sit for 2 hours. She watched him from the lantern room, this man who could command 11 packs, sitting on cold stone with his collar turned up, following her light home like every other stray. Then she came down all 91 steps and stood over him with a bowl of fish stew, because she was who she was, and there had never really been any hope for either of them. "The wolf gets the rug," she said. "The king explains the ledger." "The king," said Kael, taking the bowl with both hands like a sacrament, "has brought the ledger to his tribunal, along with 3 bound men who have discovered a sudden passion for testimony. Councillor Vesic sits in irons in the harbour garrison. The tribunal convenes tomorrow. Your father's name will be read into the record of the Reach, cleared before every pack on this coast." He looked up at her. "I would have your hand in mine when it is read, not as pardon, as correction. The Reach owes the Hart family a debt, and the Reach is going to watch its king pay it." "And after?" Her chin was up. "Lady Maren says you collect strays and go home when the court goes home." "Lady Maren," said Kael, "has withdrawn her suit, informed her father that the king is, her words, hopelessly ruined for sensible marriage, and paid your oil accounts for the next 10 years, and told absolutely no one she did it. So kindly be surprised when you find out." He set down the bowl and stood, and took her tallow-burned hands, careful of the glass cuts, and pressed them to his chest where the heartbeat was doing something wholly unregal. "There is no after in which I go home, Eloin. You are what my kind call a fated mate. My wolf knew it in the rain the first night. My wolf, you may have noticed, is smarter than I am. I am not asking you to leave your tower. I am telling you that wherever your lantern is, that is the capital of the Northern Reach now. The court can learn to climb." The tribunal was held on the harbour square, every pack elder on the coast in attendance, and the pack that had cast out the keeper's daughter got to watch her walk through the middle of them on the arm of the Alpha King, in her mended dress, because she had refused a court gown, and refused it in front of witnesses. They read her father's name and struck the old judgment from the rolls. They read Vesic's crimes, all of them, all the way back to the first bribe, and the old man stood diminished in his irons, and looked at Eloin once, only once, and mouthed something that might have been the beginning of sorry, and did not finish it, because some debts are too far past counting. He was taken north to the mine garrisons. Nobody cheered. It wasn't that kind of justice. It was the quiet kind, the kind that mostly consists of a name given back to a dead man. Then Kael turned to the packs, and the wind came off the water, and he did not raise his voice, because he had never needed to. "Hear me. This woman kept a light burning for your lost sons and daughters for 4 years, unpaid, unthanked, blamed and alone, and not one of you climbed the hill. She is my mate. She is your Luna, queen of the Northern Reach, and the keeper of its first light." His eyes swept them, honey and lamplight, and every neck on that square bent, and Eloin, who had haggled 2 silver for oil in this same market, stood level while a coastline bowed. "She is mine," said the Alpha King, and then quieter, only for her, "and I have been hers since the 91st step." The claiming mark, when it came privately, in the lantern room, at her invitation, with the beam swinging slow above them, and the whole dark sea keeping the secret. That part belongs to them. But here is what the fishing boat saw, all that autumn, and for years after, coming home late through the fog off Grey Hollow. The great lantern, burning past midnight, same as always. And on clear evenings, up in the lit glass of the tower, a small woman sitting with a book of root ledgers, and across her lap, the head of an enormous black wolf with a notched left ear, sound asleep on a threadbare grey scarf. He refuses, to this day, to surrender. Every so often she sets down the book and trims the wick and scratches the notched ear, and the beam goes out over the black water. Tick, tick, steady as a kept promise. And somewhere below, 91 steps down, a pot of fish stew sits warming on the fire, big enough now for two.